Right, welcome. Good evening or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn O'Hara, and I'm the Deputy Director for Educational Programs here at National History Day. We thank you so very, very much for joining us tonight, either because you are a student participant, teacher participant, or parent or guardian of a student who is interested in learning more and being involved in our special program, Silent Heroes, the Untold Stories of the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II. This is a program that National History Day is very proud to present, and we can only do this with the support of the National Cemetery Administration. And we have Mr. Ken Holliday from the National Cemetery Administration who is with us, and he'll talk a little bit later about what the NCA, everything in government has an acronym, so what the NCA is, what it does, and the roles that it plays, not just in my community, but in all of our communities. So, what we're going to do this evening is give some introductions and give a little bit of an overview so that you have a sense of what you're in for the year. In the end, we will give links to access permission forms for our parents or guardians to complete, as well as open things up for question and answer. A few quick housekeeping items. We do use live captioning. If that helps you, that's wonderful. It is AI generated, so we apologize if it misspells a word. We also, if that helps you, great. If it doesn't help you, you can hit the live CC button and turn it off. The second piece is that we do not have chat enabled on this account, particularly because we do work with students and minors, but we do have a Q&A box. And Mrs. Kennedy is going to be tracking the Q&A box and will ask out loud questions that you have. We also review the Q&A the next day just to make sure we didn't miss a question, because if we did miss a question, we know who you are and we can get back in touch with you and make sure we get it answered. So, just what we're going to do is start with a very simple, quick set of intros so that you know who it is that you'll be speaking with or working with throughout the course of the program. So, I mentioned my name. My name is Lynn O'Hara. I work at National History Day, and I am kind of I feel like a master puppeteer sometimes in working with this program. I think sometimes people see that I'm running the program, but there is no way that we run the program without an amazing team of people who work with us to make this magic happen. So I'm going to ask a few of our team members, not all of them because we don't have time tonight, to just introduce themselves very quickly and just to simply state why it is that they are interested in the idea of silent heroes and how it has affected their work and their lives and their teaching. So I'm going to start off with our lead facilitator, Kate Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy.
Hi there. So my name is Kate Kennedy, and like Lynn said, I'll be the lead facilitator for this program. I have was a classroom teacher for about 18 years and started out with Silent Heroes in 2019 and got to study a soldier I live in Maine, and he was from Bangor, Maine, and went to France and got to do his eulogy at his graveside and just completely changed my life in lots of different ways. And for me, my grandfather served in World War II. My dad served in Vietnam. So this is like my little way of honoring them and giving back. And I really am honored to do this work, and I can't wait to see who you guys pick for your silent heroes and the stories that you are able to find out about them.
Excellent. So, Mrs. Kennedy works with our research mentors and works with me to just help keep all of the different gears moving and the cogs working. We have two other team members who join us at different pieces of the program. First off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Christopher Hamner to talk about a little bit about his role as the lead historian. And then a little later, he'll give you a little intro as to some of the things we'll be learning. So, Dr. Hamner, you're up next.
Thanks. I'm Christopher Hamner. I am a professor at George Mason University in Virginia, just outside the Beltway. I specialize in U.S. military history and the social history of people whose lives have been touched by war. And I have been so incredibly fortunate to be working with this team and on this project or closely related projects for 10 years. Some of the most amazing work that I've ever participated in. It has transformed my teaching and my way of thinking about history And I am delighted that we are able to run the program again. And I am so looking forward to seeing what you all turn up. I am going to be presenting a series of webinars that give you a little historical background and some historical context for the lives that you're tracing. And I will be standing by to answer questions. If you find anything that doesn't quite make sense in the sources, we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll figure it out together.
Excellent. Another team member who you'll encounter not so much in the beginning of the program, but more in the end, is Mr. Chris Preparato. Mr. Preparato does a lot of our video work, and he's going to take the raw video that you shoot when you visit the national cemeteries or the state veteran cemeteries in your area and turn them into the finished projects that you will see on National History Day Silent Hero website and cross-linked on the Veterans Legacy Memorial. So, Mr. Preparato, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your role in the program?
Sure. So yeah, I'll echo Dr. Henner and say that I've been working with National History Day for over a decade on these programs. Before that, I worked with Dr. Henner at George Mason University. Primarily, my role, as Lynn said, is doing the eulogies at the end, but also there's some guidebook work that we do and some social media work that we'll do. The part of the program that makes me really excited, last year was the first year I'd worked with veterans on the side of the program, and the connections you make with people in the community, the people that come to the cemeteries for the eulogies are some really amazing connections. And that's what I'm really happy to capture when we do the eulogies.
Well, and if you're lucky enough to live close enough to where Mr. Preparato is in Iowa, he might come out and help with the filming. And that'll be a nice little treat for those of you who are within driving distance. It's a limited number. We know the country's pretty big. We
Yeah, the
also
phrase you don't hear often, lucky to live in Iowa.
I say our team is built across the country. That's the way we work. We also have 7 amazing research mentors. I don't have them introducing themselves tonight. Teachers, they have already been working with you, and their job is to support the teachers, answer research, check the information, and then also help when the research process gets stuck, as it, quite frankly, almost always does. But what I'd like to do now is to turn things over to Mr. Ken Holliday, who works for the National Cemetery Administration. And he's going to explain to us a little bit about what the NCA is and what this program falls under, which is something called the Veterans Legacy Grant Program. So, Mr. Holliday, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Lynn. As said, I'm Ken Holliday. I'm here representing the National Cemetery Administration, but more specifically the Veterans Legacy Program as part of NCA. And, my program serves as the educational outreach portion of NCA. So, you know, our program was founded in 2016 when we realized that out of our 156 national cemeteries that we oversee, that have over 5 million veterans interred in all of them. We realized that it isn't just the final resting place for these veterans, but our cemeteries also serve as almost limitless historical resources for the immediate surrounding communities, right? And so when we started thinking of it that way, we realized that we can utilize these cemeteries to start telling the stories of these veterans that are interred in there, but not necessarily by a team of professional historians or anybody within the NCA administration, but we realize that there's a lot more value in engaging our young students from around the country to learn about the veterans that are interred in the cemeteries near them. That accomplishes a couple things. The students will get to learn, real research skills. They'll get to learn bits and pieces of American history that these veterans, may have participated in. But more importantly, I think the most valuable lesson that I hope that all of the students that go through this get to realize that these veterans that are buried in these cemeteries, 9 out of 10 times, they're pretty ordinary people that have done some extraordinary things in their lives. And I hope that you can reflect on that and hopefully draw some connections to these veterans that may be strangers to you when you start this research. But by the time you do all the research and you learn about these veteran stories, you're going to grow a real intimate connection with them, and they're going to feel like family at the end. And so that's been one of the most valuable things about our program that we've seen over the years. We're now in our 8th year of the program. We're so happy to work with National History Day again this year. This kind of programming is exactly what we're looking for when we want to do this and engage students. And so, I can't thank all of you enough for being for the teachers and the parents for being the guides to the young students about to embark on this work. And I can't thank the students enough for wanting to want to do this and learn about who these veterans are. And we'll continue doing what we do at NCA. And once we get to hear about these stories that you bring back to life, we'll do our job in making sure that they're shared and that these stories are never forgotten again. So thank all of you for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Holliday. I will mention Mr. Holliday was not technically assigned to our program last year, but he has such a passion. He came out to meet students at Washington Crossing National Cemetery in Pennsylvania, as well as Rocky Gap State Veteran Cemetery in Maryland. So depending on the neat thing about our staff being across the country is you never know who might drop in for a cemetery visit. And since I travel, I sometimes show up in strange places. So, what I want to do is take a moment and pass things over to Dr. Hamner. He's going to give us just a quick little preview of what it is we're going to be learning when we meet in our monthly webinars. Now, I'm going to mention one thing at the beginning. We work very closely with our teachers because we are working with students from literally from grades 6 through 12. So teachers have the options. If they'd like to have students join the webinar live, students are always welcome. They also have the option that they might use the video of the webinar with their students or potentially a segment or sub part of it, depending on the students, the level, and their age. But what I'd like to do is ask Dr. Hammer to just give us a little bit of a tease of what it is we'll be learning when we meet for our monthly programs.
I would be happy to do that, Lynn, and I will keep it very brief. So, I have been a military historian now for about a quarter of a century, researching and writing and teaching about the experiences of people at war. And when I introduce myself as a military historian, I think sometimes people imagine that I spend almost all of my time with maps like these, kind of bird's eye views, a lot of blue and red arrows and arcane symbols. And I think sometimes I detect people's eyes glaze over a little bit, that military history is mostly the study of movements of troops on maps. And for me, the study of military history is really the study of stories. And the thing that I love so much about the Silent Hero program is we get right down on the ground and talk about the lived experience of people who went off to war, what they did, what they experienced, how they responded, and how it changed them. I was an English major in college. I got interested in history because of human stories, and there are so many human stories to tell in the World War II Pacific experience of the Marine Corps. I am so excited about this program because it is untold stories. We don't know what you're going to turn up. Most of the people that you'll be researching, people haven't looked at their records or the documents pertaining to their service in 75 or 80 years. And so it's for me, it's like coming down to a party with all sorts of wrapped gifts, and we get to open them up and see what new stories are in there. The one thing I can say with a great deal of certainty is there will be some fascinating, surprising, enlightening, illuminating things in there. People who have gone off and had these very intense experiences, write about them, talk about them. They leave detailed evidence of their lives in the records, and piecing that together is, I think, both incredibly important for us to understand about American history and also just a really fascinating, fun detective game in its own right. The other thing that I love about working with NCA is that we are telling the stories of people who survived the war. And we get to talk a little bit about coming home and transitioning back into civilian life and the way that having these experiences at war at a pretty impressionable age, 22, 23, 24 years old. These are, really important years in development, and what it means and what it feels like to come back into civilian life. That's been particularly important to me in my studies because I've become really gripped by the sort of psychology of that transition, what it's like to have an incredibly traumatizing experience and try to come back and recover from it. And we get to explore some of those dimensions too. The stories we tell and the stories that your predecessors have dug up and pieced together. They're fascinating. They're important. They have transformed my teaching. They've transformed the way that I think about American history and the questions I ask when I'm coming to a subject on war and society. This is A.D. Hamilton, who's a person that I think had probably not really been thought of, in the decades after his death during World War II. And now I had never heard of him until one of your predecessors on a program like this one pieced his life story together. And now he shows up every semester when I'm teaching about World War II because he's such a fascinating figure in his everydayness and his extraordinary service. And we get to do all of that. And for parents and teachers listening, this is also just a fantastic place in learning about these stories and in putting them in context. It is also a master class in research skills. It's a great chance to develop those muscles and to sharpen them. And we've got a fantastic, really experienced team here to help with that work. I am so excited to be part of it. And I am looking forward to seeing what kinds of stories get turned up in the next few months. And with that, I'm going to hand things back to Ms. O'Hara.
All right. Well, thank you so much. What I'd like to do now is just do a little bit of an overview, primarily for our students and parents or guardians. Teachers, you've heard a little bit of this, but we want to be clear about what the program is and what we're working on. So in this program, we've identified 50 teachers, 50 schools across the country, and they're going to be working with their students. Now, they might be working with a small group, so it might be 2, 3, 4 students. It might be a larger group or a class, and we leave that up to our teachers. Each of the teams, we refer to them as teams, the teacher-student teams, are going to select 2 veterans who served during the World War II era in the United States Marine Corps. Well, why are we doing that? We're doing that for a couple reasons. One is that we need to narrow the scope, right? To study all of World War II and try to cover it, it's so massive, it's really, really challenging. But we also wanted to highlight the Marine Corps this year because it is the 250th anniversary coming up in November. So we thought it was a good time to commemorate that and honor that. In addition, there's a special focus from the NCA to try to identify as many veterans as possible who are served as community leaders. And that's a big, broad definition. So these might be people who, when they came back, became involved in their community. Maybe they served on a town council. Maybe they volunteered with the fire department. Maybe they were involved in a civic organization. Maybe they were an entrepreneur or they were very involved in their local religious organization. There's no single definition, but that's something we're going to be looking at as we focus specifically on the veteran experience a little later on. We work over the course of about 6 months where we research these people's lives. In the end, we create profiles that we post on nhdsilentheroes.org and cross-list with the Veterans Legacy Memorial. We will also share these out so that you can click all the links that we have hyperlinked and you can play around and see a little more about what we're doing. In the spring, our teams will visit their local national or state veteran cemeteries. And there they will speak and record eulogies that they have written for their veterans. This is a very powerful experience. Sometimes family members, you'll be able to make contact with them and they may come and join you. We've also had local groups, local VFW posts, or other community organizations who've come out because they've been so moved by what our students are doing. Now, one thing that I want to be clear about this program for our parents is that the way that this works is that National History Day and our team communicates with the students' teachers. They then communicate with the students. We do not have direct communication with students. And we understand that that's also a safety issue, but we also want to make sure that while the students are driving a lot of this, Their teachers are mentoring them, guiding them, reading drafts before they go back to us. So that's the way that we structure this program. Now, in terms of timing, we work on it in stages. The first stage that we're in is about selecting the silent heroes. So the goal is that by September 26th, every group has identified 2 veterans that they're going to study. Once they make those choices from late September to October, we start by researching their lives before the war. We start learning about what happened in the first 18, 19, 20 years of their lives. And every module, there's something to read or watch. There's a live program at the beginning of the module that's a little bit of history and a little bit of research skills put together. And every module, the teams will work together to complete a research organizer. In that research organizer, they answer the questions they can figure out. So questions like, when was your silent hero born? What were the names of their parents or siblings or family members? Did they have a job before the war? Those kinds of questions. But it's also where we track our sources because we're learning how to cite sources. We're also learning how to cite some pretty unique sources. We're working with a lot of archival documents. We're working with a lot of unique sources. So we're going to work with you in each module to teach you how to cite them properly. That then builds the bibliographies that we post with our resources, because when we write history, we share our sources. So each module is somewhere between 3 to 5 weeks long. We start with life before the war. Then we focus on home front and communities. Likely from there, we will go to focus on the veteran experience. And the reason for that, I know we jump a little out of chronology, but as soon as the teachers make the final selections on the veterans, we request files from the National Archives and Records Administration. We send in a lot of requests, and it can take several weeks or several months for them to come back. I can tell you, I have already sent 2 batches off, and there's going to be a whole nother batch. I think there's going to be about 50 more that are ready to go that are going to be going off into the mail tomorrow. But it is a timely process. So likely we will focus on their veteran experience and then end with their military experience. What we then do in our big module, the one that goes from January to April, is that we work with the teams to write and record their eulogies. And then in the springtime, sometime between the middle of February and the middle of April, the students will visit their cemeteries and read and record their eulogies at their veterans' grave or memorial marker, wherever it is that they're remembered. And we've also linked some examples from last year. Last year, we focused on the Korean War. This year, we're doing World War II. But if you take a minute to look at a couple of these, it'll give you some ideas. And we have some examples from middle and high school students from different parts of the country in those samples. From there, we draft up their story. So we take all the research we've done and we synthesize it into a narrative. And I'm going to be clear, we are synthesizing. AI is not synthesizing. One of the big things that we're going to drive home is we want our students being the writers. And I'm going to be honest, that makes it harder. When Mrs. Kennedy and I are editing, that means more work for us. But we think it's incredibly important that our students take the ownership to do the hard work of the synthesis and to put it together, because that's the magic of the learning process. Once we have profiles, we post them into both places. We double check that all our facts are correct, and we share that information out. Another thing to be aware of is that we do alert the press and the media. So in November, we will put out a press release. This is just a snapshot from last year's, in which we notify our communities what's going on. So we'll let them know that a teacher from a particular school has selected the following veterans from the following cemetery. This does 2 things. First off, it helps to get the word out. It helps to get some recognition for what you're doing. But more importantly, it can often help the teacher make connections, either to those community organizations who might be very, very interested in this project, and or to family members who might read to be like, wait a second, isn't that your dad? Isn't that your mother-in-law? And start to make those connections. And they have the chance then to connect with the teachers to potentially engage with our researchers. So we do a press pitch in the fall about what, who we're researching. And then as your cemetery visits go, we let local press in the area know that you're going to be out and visiting. And we had some wonderful, beautiful coverage that took place at the local level last year. So we're hoping to get some news stories this year. Now, where we go with this and why are we doing this? And it's to tell these stories. Almost none of the people that you have chosen are ever going to show up in a journal article, are ever going to show up in a book. Their stories aren't told in many of the traditional ways. This is our chance to help tell their stories and to make sure that what they did is written down, documented, researched, verified, and preserved for history. But I'm going to mention one other thing. It's also to honor these people. We had a contact from one of our teachers about 2 weeks ago who participated in the program last year. And it turns out, in addition to the children that we knew that this veteran had, there was another child who had been adopted and later found her biological mother and was able to connect with that teacher through social media, and the teacher's in the process of having that child speak, that adult daughter, excuse me, speak with her students. And because it's a web profile, if we get new information, we can edit it. And we think that's important because research evolves. And as we know more, as we learn more, we make changes. Now, before we move into our last piece, I do want to mention to our parents and guardians that there are 3 things that we can't move forward without your permission for. There are 3 questions that you'll be asked on the permission form. The first is permission for your child to participate. If you say no, we will let the teacher know, and we totally respect that. The second question is whether you would allow your child to appear on camera or have their voice recorded on camera. That is completely up to the students and the parents or guardians. If a student wants to participate as a researcher and not appear on camera, that's 100% okay. We will respect that completely. The third question is how you would like to be named. Students are giving researcher credit and byline credit for the work that they do. And there are 3 options. We can use the student's first and last name, we can use a first name only, or we can leave a student's name off. We understand that based on your circumstance, your situation, or your preferences, you may have a preference for any of the 3. So please know it's okay for a student to participate regardless of them appearing on camera and regardless of their name being published. And we use these permission forms. Once a profile is done, we go back and double check every name to make sure that we've got it correct. And we confirm with the teachers that that particular student didn't appear on camera or their voice is not on the recording. So we want to make sure that we respect those wishes. Okay, moving on to our next steps. We have 2 QR codes up on the screen. If you are a parent or a guardian, we're going to ask you to please submit a student permission form by October 3rd. You can either use this QR code or your student's teacher has a flyer with it on and the link that they can send you for you to complete. And we'll tally these up, we update them daily, we let the teachers know who we have forms for, and they can help follow up accordingly. If you're one of our teachers and you're here live, if you could take just a moment to fill out the meeting attendance form, that helps us just know that you're here. That's our attendance check for the night. But just make sure we've got parents and teachers using one URL or QR code and teachers using the other. So if you make a mistake, it's okay. We'll fix it. Don't worry about it. We know our lists. So what I'd like to do before we wrap here is open things up to questions. If you have questions about what we're going to learn, how we do the research, how we run the cemetery visits, how the National Cemetery Administration works, or what qualifies someone for burial in a national cemetery or the state veteran cemetery in your area, we'd love to hear from you. So please go ahead into that Q&A box, drop a question, and the best team member to answer it will jump on in. Let's see. Do we have any questions yet, Mrs. Kennedy, or we're being shy tonight?
I think we're being shy tonight.
We'll give it just a minute. My guess is somebody has a question, or they're furiously filling out their permission forms. That happens too.
Hard to juggle, but you did do a good job explaining everything. Oh, here we go. There's a question. Are there any potential scholarships?
That's a good question. No, we do not have any funding built in for scholarships. There are different federal regulations. That's a different type of a program than the program that we are running. So unfortunately, we do not have any potential scholarships built in. However, students can use this as a professional credit. They can add it to a resume. I've seen a couple students who've written about this as their in a college essay. An academic experience, something that moved them, something that changed them. But unfortunately, we don't have a scholarship connected to this. Thank you for asking, though.
I had a student do that. They wrote about their experience with Silent Heroes for their college entrance essay, and they got in. It's a good one.
While we're waiting, again, if you have no other questions, we appreciate your time tonight and you're welcome to leave. We'll wait just another minute to see if there are questions. While we're waiting, though, Mr. Holliday, here's a question that we get. When we're working with national cemeteries, can you explain the difference between the national cemeteries and probably the most famous cemetery with the name National Cemetery, which is Arlington National Cemetery, right outside of Washington? Can you explain why there's a distinction between the NCA cemeteries and Arlington?
Sure. Well, the easy short answer is the Army still has Arlington and won't give it up to us. But the reality is, our agency operates the 156 other national cemeteries that are federally owned and operated. Then we've also provided grants to state Veterans Affairs departments to build state veteran cemeteries that we don't actually operate, but we funded in the creation. And so they also manage their cemeteries in accordance with our same standards. So it's almost impossible to see the difference. But really, the 156 that we own and operate, it's grown a lot in modern years since the VA has existed. But before that, our agency really stemmed out of Lincoln's vision after the end of the Civil War, where we had to bury our dead from the Civil War, and so there were 14 original national cemeteries that were established. And at the time, it was the War Department that I think oversaw it, and then it's grown, and then the VA was funded later on, and then we've taken all of them since. So we have national cemeteries as old as the Civil War. So those are what we call the original 14. In fact, one of them is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Arlington National Cemetery. So it's a lot smaller and a lot less known. Arlington is the big one. When you go to DC, everybody wants to go to Arlington, but there's a much smaller cemetery that's actually older than Arlington National Cemetery in Alexandria, just 5 minutes down the road. So that's one of our prides. So we had the original 14, and then since then we've grown, and I think we just actually we just had we broke ground on the newest one out in Utah just this past week is open. So depending on where you are in the country, I'm not sure if the cemetery you'll be working in is what we call a historic cemetery, where it's from maybe one of the original 14s, or if it's one of our more modern national cemeteries. But there's lessons to be learned just about. We could really start talking about the differences in national cemeteries, the lessons that are learned just in the differences. But yeah, that's really essentially the difference. Is the VA operates the 156, and then Arlington is owned by the Army.
Excellent. Okay, it looks like we have a couple questions in the queue. Miss Kennedy, who's up next?
Yeah, I'm just going to pop ahead to let Mr. Holliday kind of elaborate, because someone had a question for him off topic. Do you and your group manage the Normandy American Cemetery in France?
No, so the overseas cemeteries are owned and operated by we call them our sister agency, the American Battle Monuments Commission. They're another federal organization, and they strictly do the overseas cemeteries, whereas we do all of the domestic cemeteries, Hawaii, and then also Puerto Rico and two in Alaska.
So similar mission, different location.
Yes.
Next question. How would we get to the cemeteries?
This is where your teachers get involved. So we work with your teachers and they plan a cemetery visit. So how do they get there? It varies. For the majority of our students and teachers, they'll coordinate either a school district bus or a van, depending on the size of the group. Sometimes if it's a smaller group, they might coordinate with parents to drive to the location. I know one of our groups last year, the school was located across the street from the cemetery, so they literally walked. So the answer is going to be a little bit different, but your teachers will coordinate that. We start working with them in November to go ahead and start the planning, and we confirm all of our dates by the end of January. We also make a date and a backup date because, weather happens.
And the same student had a follow-up on that of what cemeteries would we go to?
So your teacher will know the answer of the specific cemetery that you are assigned to. And it is our general rule is that they have to be within about an hour or an hour and a half of where your school is located. Obviously, some of you will be closer, some of you will be further. But check with your teacher and they'll let you know the exact location and the exact cemetery that you'll have the opportunity to visit.
Okay, next up, does the research we do go on online websites and magazines like Ancestry.com?
Oh, this is the magic of research. We're going to use a wide range of sources. So we're going to be looking both at primary and secondary materials. So we're going to be using primary sources. We do use Ancestry or Ancestry Clash. I mean, your teachers are going to help get you connected on these to help research some things that in the past would only be available in certain locations. So we'll be looking at things like US Census records. Where was this veteran living in 1930 and 1940? Who was living in the household? How were they earning an income or were they earning an income? And what's going on in the neighborhood or the street where they live? We'll also be using different sources like newspapers. We'll be looking at community resources and archives, but we're also going to use secondary materials. One of the things that we're going to be looking at is to tell us about the community that your veteran lived in before the war. So what was it like to live in South Florida during World War II versus Northern Maine versus Western Colorado? So we're going to learn a little bit about your community. When we get into the military research, this is where we really have to weave together the primary and the secondary. Luckily, for most of you, we should cross those fingers, be able to obtain personnel files from the National Archives. And those can be anywhere from our record is 600 plus pages of weaving together different details of someone's military service. But we also have to use secondary materials. So if you know that your veterans served with the 3rd Marines, and if you know that where they served at the Battle of Iwo Jima with a particular unit and had a particular job, we often have to use secondary sources to fill in those gaps, to understand, for example, what was an amphibious tank battalion, or what happened at a particular location on a particular island. While the vast majority of the Marines do serve in the Pacific Theater of Operations, there are a handful in Europe, and we might end up with one of them. So we'll take a look. We're watching the selection list narrow itself down. So we'll keep you posted on that one. But we're going to weave together both primary and secondary sources. And I want you to know we're going to help you every step of the way have some direction on where to go, what to look for, and when you get stuck, people to reach out to.
And this is where that detective work comes in. We get all sorts of primary sources and data. Even people who never become famous, leave records and marks as they make their way through the world. And part of this kind of historical research is gathering them together and then trying to assemble them into some sort of narrative of the life. And we've got a great team that has a lot of experience doing it. I have been surprised over and over again about how much you can make out of often, what seems like just a few points or a few marks that a person has left in the news. There's often a whole story there that you can put together.
You never know. Sometimes you find these amazing pictures or letters that were published in the local newspaper, or you connect with a family member and they might have letters, or they might have written records. Or in some cases, some of our veterans left oral histories before they passed. So they recorded their story of their lives. And it's like going into the past and listening to one of these historical figures. It's really pretty amazing.
And going along with that, someone asked, when we research the documents, will they be in person or online?
We'll have to see. Um, a lot of the work is going to be online. But when you're researching your communities, depending on where you are, you might take a trip to the local historical society or the public library, or maybe there's a local official or maybe a community historian who your teacher might invite into your classroom. The key with the research is the experience is a little bit different for every group of students and teachers. So we can't say exactly what you'll do because it has to evolve as it happens. And that's kind of the magic and the fun of research.
We have a couple more left, unless
Okay.
anyone hasn't typed one up yet. So the next one is, would we have to bring anything with us?
We'll give specific instructions to your teachers for when you're visiting the cemeteries. Honestly, these are very simple visits, and it's much less about bringing things and much more about going with an open mind and being open to an experience. Because I think sometimes we associate cemeteries as kind of bad places. They're places that are sad, they're places that seem dark. But I think we're going to help you rethink about them as places where we honor people, as places where we remember people, and as places where we care for those people, whether they passed 2 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's a place to go and remember them and tell their story. And they're an important piece of our community, even if it's maybe a piece of our community that we don't think about all the time, or maybe sometimes don't want to think about. But I think it'll give you a real insight to something in your community. We always talk at History Day about how doing historical research and learning about our communities and our people and the events of the past help make engaged, informed citizens. And we think this is a great way because you're going to learn about a story, you're going to learn about World War II, but through the eyes of one person. And I trust you, once you do that, you won't look at World War II quite the same again. And I think you'll look a little differently when you find someone in your community who might be wearing a veteran hat, whether that be for Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, Persian Gulf, or Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think we're going to challenge the way you think and kind of change that a little bit.
Okay, last question, I think, from the Calverton school teacher. We are
Mrs.
excited.
Dreyer. Thank you, Mrs. Dreyer.
We are excited to have a couple. I'm excited about this one too. We were researching the wife as one of the few female U.S. Marine Corps World War II buried at our cemetery and found out that she was buried with her husband there. He was also a U.S. Marine Corps World War II veteran. Have any other silent heroes been related or married before?
That's a great question. We have had several sets of siblings who've been profiled. If you go to nhdsilentheroes.org, there are at least 3 sets of brothers that I can remember off the top of my head. So please look up the Akamoto brothers
Oh, yeah.
at Lorraine American Cemetery overseas, as well as 2 at Normandy American Cemetery, the Benino brothers. And then we also have the Pieper brothers at Normandy, Pieper, and yes, that's the way it's pronounced. The Pieper brothers were originally not buried as brothers because one was buried at Normandy and the other one was buried as someone who was an unknown. And later on, in part based on the research of one of their students and a connection to the family members, we were able to get a DNA sample. Yeah, the second brother was positively identified, and the brothers were reburied together at Normandy. And I'll mention there is one other set of brothers at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii, who are the Shive brothers, Shive. Now, to date, we don't have any husband and wife pairs. However, I know that there's at least two teachers
There's
considering
two. Yeah.
looking at the potential of doing a married couple. So that would be a first for us in two very different places. So we think that's exciting. So we'll leave it up to you if that's the final choice that you make.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. That's it for questions.
All right. Well, then what we're going to do is end our program here. We're going to say thank you. Thank you for taking your time. Teachers, students, parents, thank you for listening to us and learning about this program. We are excited to have you on board. We know that this is a program that we all have a passion for, and we're very excited to be able to bring this to several hundred students and 50 new teachers this year. And I just need to say, we cannot do this without the support of the National Cemetery Administration and the work of Mr. Holliday and his team there, because man, they have really supported us and bought into what we're doing and have helped us share these stories. I'll mention one other thing. Earlier in the week on NHD's Facebook and Instagram, we ran our first social media story from one of our silent hero researchers from last week. Dr. Megan Beering, who's one of our research mentors, was featured, I believe, on Tuesday, but you can check the social media and tell us for sure, where she tells us just a very quick snip of the story of her and her students and their research last year and their cemetery visit. So you can check that out and get a little taste of what's to come. Keep an eye on our social media. We'll be running one story a month from our National Cemetery Administration program and a second story a month because we also work with the American Battle Monuments Commission as well to tell the stories of those who perished in war. So with that, we're going to go ahead and stop our recording. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to having you work with us during this academic year.